Hello, welcome to the Bluebird Sampler Embroidery Pattern Tutorial. Welcome, welcome. So I'm just going to do a quick run through of the contents of the kit and some really beginner stuff. If you want to jump ahead to the stitching, go for it. Otherwise, welcome. We're going to make this cute little bird. I have not finished mine in the hoop yet, but at the end I will be doing that and frame it in the hoop. Another cute alternative with this one is to get one of these fake wooden hoops. It'll be pretty tight, but I think it'll be also very cute. So that's another option for framing your finished work. All right, so if you grab the kit, you are going to have this printed fabric in it. You can see it has the design, and it also has these blue guidelines to help you know which direction to stitch when you're working on the bird. These guidelines are permanent, so you want to make sure that you cover them with your stitches. All right, you're going to have a hand embroidery hoop in your kit. Yours is not going to have fabric on it like this. Yours is going to be blank like this one here. So what I do, this is, I have lots of hoops. So the ones that I keep bare like this, I use for framing. And then I kind of have a set that I use to stitch in that I have, you can see this is just a like scrap fabric that I've wrapped around. That's it. That's all this is. It could probably use a little TLC, cutting these little weird strands off. If you want, you can even like add a stitch here to keep it from unraveling. Up to you. And the point of that is to help us with tension when we frame up our fabric and our hoop. So it is very important that we get our fabric drawn tight. So right now it's loose. Let's see how it's bouncy. You can see the crease in it. So this is how I go about it. I tighten from the top like this. I go as tight as I can. I had it very loose. And then I go around and pull the slack out. All the way back up to the top. And then I will tighten again if there's still some to give. So now you can hear it. You don't see that crease anymore. This is pretty good, I think. If you want to get even tighter, you can use a screwdriver and you can tighten it with a screwdriver. In addition to wrapping this inner hoop, you can also wrap your outer hoop, and that's going to allow you to get even tighter. I find that just wrapping the inner hoop is pretty sufficient for me. So, all right, so that's how you're going to set that up. You're going to have a floss card like this. Oh, I'm loving these colors. So you're going to want to untie. They're just knotted together so they're not a big spaghetti mess in your kit. And let's see, we're going to be starting with color 167. So I'll pull that out. So you can see there's multiple strands of some colors. And some colors just have a single, like this dark green, there's just one. There should be, it's calculated so that you will have enough thread and a little extra. Okay, so each, whoops, I'm all tangled. Okay, so this is 6-stranded embroidery thread, right? And so if you look at the end, you can kind of fiddle with it and you can see the little strands. So for most of what we're doing, we're using all 6 strands, so you don't need to do a thing with this. For the leaves, we're going to be using 3. So actually, I will pull out this green so you can see what that looks like. So for that, there's a couple ways you can do this. You can pull out 1 strand at a time. That's going to be the safest way. So how I do is I hold on to the bulk, and you're just going to pull out a strand. And then another strand. And then a 3rd strand. So what you're left with is 3 strands to stitch with here. So that's what you're going to stitch with when you're doing the leaves. And then over here I've pulled out the 3 that I will recombine on my own time. So let's see. What else do I want to tell you? So these lengths are 3 feet long, which it's a slightly awkward length. I feel like cutting it in half is one option. You can just stitch with 1.5 feet, but that's pretty short. But I feel like 3 feet is a little long. I feel like somewhere in between is a sweet spot, but if you find that you're using the 3 feet and you're getting lots and lots of tangles and getting frustrated, then I would suggest moving to cutting your lengths in half. All right, so let me go ahead and thread a needle here for you. So I like to, mine's nice and frayed, right? So it's gonna be pretty hard to get that through the eye of a needle. So I'm gonna do the lick, and I'm gonna give the tip a little snip to make it nice and sharp. And I'm going to thread. And that actually works pretty well. Okay, sometimes on camera, it's like you never know if you're going to get it. So that's how we thread the needle. I will show you a little trick here. So if you are just having a hard time with that, there's something called needle threaders that some people like to use. Another thing you can do is if you are going to be stitching with the 6 strands, so pretend like we're not using green, you can actually do this same process that I've started with the green and thread your needle with the 3. Okay. And wrap it over so that the 2 ends meet. Sorry, my workspace is now getting busy and a little erratic. Okay. So here we go. I have the 3-ply on the needle doubled over. So if I tie a knot here or anchor here and stitch with this doubled over length, that's 6 strands, right? But it was a lot easier to thread on the needle. So that's a little trick you can use. I don't have to unthread that. All right, so let's see what else. Just really quickly, you're going to want to have some embroidery scissors. You're going to have your instructions. You're going to have the beginner guide that's going to be useful. I like to keep a pen around as well, specifically like when we come to some of the florals, it might be nice to add extra guidelines if you like them. Like these are going to be like fishbone stitch. So sometimes it helps me to have like a line drawn down the center to help me know where the center line is. Or for the satin stitch here on the daisy, like, you know, if I'm worried about keeping my stitch direction consistent, you can come in and add more guidelines for yourself. Totally optional. This is a water erasable marker, but all of these are going to get covered with stitches, so you could use a pencil, you could use like any tool to write with that. So whatever you want. Okay, let's see. So we're going to be starting with the tails. I'm just going to show you how I anchor. I'm fine with just tying a knot. Usually the first stitch, that's how I start. So I will just tie a knot in the back, my strand here. That's it. And then I'll be coming up like here to start my back stitches. Okay. You can see that's it. That's how I anchor. It's pretty simple. Like some people are anti-knot and I'm okay with it. So I'll show you some other options as we go, but hopefully you can see here I have my floss folded over on my needle. And at the beginning, what you're going to want to do is have it folded over quite a bit. We're only stitching with the 6 strands, right? But as we go, we're going to be using up more and more of this. So you're going to be moving your needle along and along and along, and this little tail is going to get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter as we stitch, right? So, all right, let's do it. Let's go stitch. All right, so I have my darker brown thread, and like I showed you guys, I am anchored from the back, and I am just going to be doing rows of backstitch. So, okay, there is a cat right here. Hey, buddy, can you move your ear? Thanks, man. Excuse you. All right, so backstitch. So this is the start of my line, but I'm doing stitches that go back. So I come up a stitch length away from the beginning of my line and go back. And pop up a stitch length away from there. So you can see this thread I just pulled up. So that is from my anchor. I am from the back, just kind of gently pulling it back through. So this stitch, I am going to go down in this same hole. Now this is a little tricky because I did put a knot here. So you want to make sure that we don't hit our anchor knot when we go down. I just kind of wiggled it to the side from the back so that I didn't pierce it. And I'm going to keep going. So I think the key with this is to just make sure you use the same holes. If you are not going down exactly the same hole as the previous stitch, you're going to have gaps in between your stitches. We don't want that. One thing to think about is the thickness of 6-ply of thread is thicker than my guideline, right? There's a truck backing up outside. Sorry. So I'm just piercing right on that guideline, and it's fine. What it's doing is it's actually making my tail a little bit larger, right? I think it's probably the easiest way is just to go right on the guideline. Alternatively, you could just go a hair to the side, a hair within the guideline. So you're still covering the guideline, but not going too far beyond it. Again, the guidelines are permanent, so you do want to make sure they're covered though. So another tip with backstitch, I think having consistent stitch lengths is pretty important. I don't have consistent stitch lengths today. Apparently speaking and doing that at the same time is too hard. Okay, so at this point I have to make a decision. So there's a couple ways you could do this. You could see how I did it on my sample hoop. You can go back up doing this side, or you can just start going back and forth. I think I'm just going to start going back and forth. So, and what I like to do is like stagger my back stitches. I forgot what they were called for a second there, obviously. So they kind of look like bricks when you stagger them like this, so that I have the beginning of these stitches centered on the previous one. So I don't know if you can see I have like some loosening happening here on my fabric. I'm going to take a moment and retighten. So I talked about tightening our fabric before, but I didn't tell you why. So if we don't keep our fabric tight and our stitches are tighter than our fabric, we're going to get puckering. So we're going to be, the stitches are actually going to like bring the fabric closer together, right? And we're going to get these wrinkles in our work that we cannot remove because they're not actually wrinkles. So try your best to get nice tight fabric and pay attention to the tension of your stitches. So I like to think about matching the tension of my stitches to the tension of my fabric. So when I go down here, I want to make sure that all that thread is pulled through, but I'm not pulling it really tight. It's just having a lie down on the fabric there, right? It's just gently draping there. We don't want, obviously, it loose like that. That's a different kind of stitch. But just, so here's, I don't know if you can see the stitch I did. So here it is just laying loosely versus pulling really tight. Okay. And if you see how this hole has appeared when I pulled really tight, if you're seeing holes like that, you may be having too much tension. You may need to take a deep breath and relax as well. I know I do, whether I have holes like that in my fabric or not. All right, so I don't know if you noticed I kind of got off with my, oops, actually, teaching moment. So this is a weird little knot that we get sometimes when we do hand embroidery. It is formed when your thread twists on itself. So sometimes you can just pull on it and it will undo itself. Maybe. It wants to, yep. So you can see how like spirally it is right there because it's created from twisting. So one thing you can do is, I'm going to do it right now. You won't be able to see it. I'm going to letting go of my needle and it's hanging down off the back of my hoop, and any twists will kind of untwist. Basically when I stitch, I'm rotating the needle. Every time I stitch, I kind of do a rotation in my fingers. Not on purpose, it's just how it happens. And over time, that's creating that twist and it creates those knots. Okay, so let's see, I was talking about stitch length. So I got off. Remember, I was like going to do these kind of brick looking ones, and here they're actually matching up, and that's fine. You might want it to look like this. You might want them all to match up. You might want them to be offset like this. It's up to you. You might just want to concentrate on one row at a time and getting your stitches lined up in any particular way is maybe, we'll save that for another day, you know. It's up to you. Okay, all of a sudden I'm doing a very long stitch. Wow. Okay. When I started, I really shouldn't have made those stitches so small because I find that I end up echoing the stitch length throughout. The smaller your stitches, the more stitches it's going to take, right? All right, so you're going to keep going like that just to see how it looks here. Let's see here. So when I did it on the sample hoop, I started on this side. You can see I did do the alternating, and it worked until it didn't work. It looks like I did, I'm guessing I did this and then I did this, because you can see how this outline doesn't match up there. But that's, if we ignore this side, that's what it's going to look like if you kind of do the alternating brick look. So, okie doke. But here you can see this is kind of like an unorganized, not worrying too much about it one way or another, and it's going to look fine too. So don't overthink it. I probably just did. Okay, so I'm going to come up here. We're feeling this chest shape. So I'm coming up at the top right, and I'm going to do a line here. So I'm going to go down. These stitches are going to be a little bit longer. So I'm going to go down here. And I'm going to leave some slack because I want to come up here in between these two stitches before pulling that slack out. Oh, that's very twisty. My goodness. Twisty thread here. Okay, so I don't know if you can see there's like a weird little bloop, technical term there. So what you're seeing there is one of the plies is kind of wanting to do its own thing. And sometimes it helps to pull them all out and kind of get them all kind of on the same page again before pulling back out. And usually they'll lay down a little bit better. Sometimes I'll actually come in with my needle and like encourage some mingling, because the one is antisocial, I guess. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so we're gonna come down stitch length away. And what is the stitch length away? Like, it honestly depends on my mood. It depends on the day. Play with different stitch lengths. See what that means to you. Some people like really small stitches. All right, before I start going off on that, so I'm gonna come up in between. So it's pretty much where we went down with the original stitch. If we want to say we came up at A, down at B, up at C, down at D. Now we're going to come back up at B or near B. Okay, so I pull like to the right and then to the left. Just kind of see how it lays down. And what's happening is we're getting this cool rope looking stitch. So again, when I was saying about stitch length, it really depends. Like, some people really want precise, tiny little stitches, and some people don't, and that's okay. And it can change. Sometimes I have like projects I work on that like I want that look of like really small, perfect little stitches, you know. And other times I'm like, I just want to fill this shape. Let's do this. Okay, I feel like this particular strand of floss I'm working with, I usually am not having to fiddle so much with. I'm actually going to, see, how do I want to do this? I am going to separate my strands temporarily on this long length. I won't show you because it might be ugly, and then kind of lay them all back together because I have a weird thread. One moment, please. Technical difficulties. Okay, I think that helped. Let's see. So I didn't undo any stitches. I took my needle off and I separated the strands up to that last stitch. And I don't know if you can see, like, I don't have much of a twist anymore because I didn't twist them back together. They're just laying next to each other. Shoot, no. See, they're still not being friendly. There, they are now, I guess. Well, we'll see. We'll keep going. I'll keep going. This might be, I admit I've never had a strand of floss behave so poorly. I think part of it is this particular stitch is definitely sensitive, as would be like a chain stitch. If your ply are not one with each other, you'll see it in those stitches for sure. And I guess satin stitch too. Okay, I guess a lot of stitches you'll notice it. I mean, split stitch, you probably wouldn't. Back stitch, maybe not as much. Sorry, that was a very dramatic yank. I had there was a knot in the back I was pulling through. I just kind of was pretty aggressive there for a moment. Okay, so I'm gonna come back down. And now, so I want to keep this like ropey look and I want it to be consistent. So I'm actually going to jump back up here, which is, it's kind of a long jump. If you want to like weave back through the back of these stitches because you're nervous about having such a long jump, then you should. I'm not going to. I'm just going to jump. And go again. So make sure you're consistent with keeping your thread loose to the right when you do this. That was a bad one. Oh my. I feel like this thread needs some thread conditioner, which I rarely use, or some wax. Do you guys remember Thread Heaven? I still have like a tiny jar of it that I haven't opened. I never really used it much, but once like I found out they were not going to make it anymore, I was like, oh, I must keep this precious pot of Thread Heaven. Maybe it'll be worth something like Beanie Baby someday. I just aged myself. Alright. Oh, this doesn't look very good. I'll keep going. So yes, keep your looseness to the right. As you go down, keep it consistent, and that's going to keep your twisted rope consistently twisting the same direction. Alright, so split stitch. We're just gonna go make a stitch, and we're gonna come up underneath it and split it. Oops, a tangle. Here we go. And then go back down. So I find this challenging. So I'm going to show you an alternative. Something called back split stitch, where we come up like half a stitch away and we go back. I just find it so much easier to split from the top. So it's up to you how you want to do it. I would say like pick one and stick with it, but I'm not really sure it matters, to be honest. The split stitch texture is a lot more, it's not going to look as consistent as the other stitches, either way you do it. So, I don't know, it's up to you. Oops. If you're doing any of these stitches and you find that it is way too bulky with 6-ply, you do not have to use 6-ply. You can drop down to fewer strands, absolutely. Oops, I left a mess back there. Now everyone knows. I find split stitch with 6-ply a little bit weird, personally. Oh my word. I need to clean that up. So it's a little awkward coming around this bend. I'm kind of doing, I mean, what is that? That's just a straight stitch, but I'm going to kind of split into it here as I come back up. So I'm just doing an outline here of this body shape. So yeah, I find like I do 6-ply with the other stitches, I think, pretty regularly. It's just the split stitch. I got a knot. Let's take a minute. I'm actually going to show you what kind of awful things are happening behind here. Oh, it's not so bad. Okay, so I've just got another one of these. Okay, I just spent way too much time trying to get it out. I think it's a goner, so I'm just going to show you what I'm going to do here. I'm going to, I'm just going to cut it out. That's what I'm going to do. And I am going to then show you a different way to start your thread, since we need to now do that. So I have my thread here. Okay, I have my thread here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these stitches to anchor in. You can just go in once if you want. Going in twice is going to be sturdier. So now I have a nice sturdy anchor. Okay. Now you might be like, oh my gosh, what about this tail we have here? Well, so this is the tail where I just cut. Okay. So that's connected to this last stitch right here. So technically I could pull this out and see how I can get it loose, right? But watch this. So that with this next stitch, let me pull that slack back out. Sorry if you're getting dizzy here. I'll be back on my hoop stand shortly. So I'm basically going to take my next stitch down like this, right? And as a result, like this, that stitch, that's not going anywhere, right? I just like split it. So it's okay that we have this like random tail here that I cut. So continue to outline the body with this split stitch. And then you'll just kind of start to fill it in, kind of following along the guidelines. That's it. I'm not sure. Oh, what stitch was that? All right, that must be a good time to... I didn't actually split. I think I only split like a single ply from that stitch. So that must be a sign from the universe to move on. So this one's a little tricky. I didn't really perfect it here. Well, let's give it a shot. All right. So we got the bottom row first. So if you want, you can like designate where that's going to be. Kind of split your wing into two shapes here. This is where it'd be really nice if I had finished that stitch. All right, hold on. All right, so we're going to do our second row here. So I'm trying to think, you could start at one end and move to the other. Honestly, I think that the safest route is going to be like doing a center. I'm calling that center-ish. And then kind of working in either direction from here. So I'm going to come up a hole, go down the same hole. If you have a knot back here, which I do, don't go down the knot. So I'm pulling the knot off to the side so I can kind of sneak in there. All right, so we're going to make our little loop. And then I'm going to come down here. Now, if you want, you can come down, I pick it up right at the guideline. I'm actually going to go a little bit above the guideline so that when I come down, I'm a little bit below it, but not too far down. Making my detached chain stitch. That's pretty puffy, which is okay. It's up to you if you want yours that puffy. The ones I did in the sample hoop, I feel like they're skinnier, although once we get more in here, this will get a little bit squished. So the reason mine's so puffy is just tension. So let's keep going. So right next to it, come up. So the thing with the puffy ones is you're going to have some of the fabric showing through. Is that bad or good? I don't know. If you don't like it, make your detached chain stitches tighter. So here, if I pull tighter, see, it can get real tight. But I don't know if you noticed the fabric started to pucker a little bit, so there's kind of a balance there. Another option is you could put tiny little straight stitches behind there to hide the fabric. So as we get further away from the center, we're kind of changing that angle, right? So where they come out at the top here is closer together, and then it kind of gets further apart. Although at this point, that's not so much the truth. Over here, that will be more similar to the truth. Let's continue. Let's not jump ahead of ourselves. So it can be a little tricky because how do I know how many stitches are going to fit in there? And at this point, I'm going to fit this one and then one more. So make sure this one isn't too big. But at the same time, once we're right here, we can actually have this stitch overlap this split stitch a little bit if we want. So I don't think I'm going to go down into the split stitch with my needle. I'm going to go down like next to it, but you can see that the part of the chain like is overlapping. Actually, it's overlapping a weirdly large amount, so I'm actually going to make it a little bit tighter. Okay, so now I'm going to work in the other direction. My chair is not in the right place for this. If it helps you, you can always like mark on your fabric every single one of these before you do it. Just make a little line where you want each one, so you know which direction you want it to face and how many you're going to fit. So here I'm going to come pretty close because I'm starting to change that angle. Here I've got a single ply that's misbehaving a bit. Yeah, I didn't fix it. I'll just keep going. So here, see I'm coming up pretty close at the top, but I'm having to really kind of exaggerate over here. And my stitch is even longer. And for the last one, going way over here, something like that, all right? So I know I have this like guideline, really pointy. And you could make this anchor stitch kind of long if you wanted to follow along with that guideline. looks cool. Okay, so then we're gonna do the top row. It's pretty much the same thing. So again, I think it's probably good to start in the center. And I kind of had them fall in between. Oops. So when I come down, I'm kind of coming down in between these two stitches. Like this. I'm playing a little bit of thread chicken here. I'm going to have to get some more because I do want to demo this whole thing because this is probably the trickiest part of the design. Okay, I'm going to grab more thread. Oh, I did want to say, so right now my hoop is clamped to my desk. What is this? Oh, that's my tail. Okay. Sorry, I found some random thread back there, and I was like, oh, where'd you come from? Okay, I'm sorry. I was very concentrated on that stitch. There was no words coming out. Clamp, yes. Okay, so when I make my videos, I use a clamp to keep my embroidery still so you're not having to, you know, take those motion sickness pills before you watch. But usually when I stitch, I don't use a clamp. I just keep my project in my hands. And I find it useful to stitch like that because it's easy to rotate the hoop if I need to, or flip to the back and weave in any ends, or see if there's any knots back there, or, you know, just having that flexibility of mobility. So it's up to you what works best. I mean, especially with these small projects, this is just a 4-inch hoop here. I think it's nice to just be able to keep them in your hands. But if you prefer using a clamp, do it. It's not required, though, is what I'm trying to say. Alright, so you can see there's barely any guideline that I'm covering here, but I have one more stitch to go. And here. Oops, pulled up. Speaking of checking out what's going on in the back, I definitely have some threads that are being unruly. I need to trim. It's just really hard to, you pretty much have to unclamp on the clamp I have. I know there's some fancy ones out there that allow you to easily see the back of your work, but I do not have one of those. I am using a clamp from the hardware store, so it's just a clamp. It's just a clamp. So be mindful when you are doing this top row of detached chain stitches that you come up right on that guideline so you are creating a nice edge. Mine got a little bit messy in my sample hoop because this is tricky. This is, like I said, this is the trickiest part, I think. If you do this and it's not working, it's okay. You can practice it. If you hate it, take it out. Do a different stitch here. You could do the chain stitch like we're gonna do down here. You could do more back stitch so it kind of matches this. You could do satin stitch. Stitcher's choice. Remember, this should be fun. I promise. It should be fun. It can be frustrating, but it should mostly be fun. Okay? If you're not having fun, change something. Like if your thread's not going through a needle, grab a bigger needle. If this one stitch isn't working, use a different stitch. Like, honestly, when I was doing this with this light tan, I probably should have just grabbed another thread and just used a different one, because that's not fun. It should be fun. It should be relaxing, right? Okay, let's do our wings. I'm going to start, I'm going to start over here. So, if you haven't noticed already, I am a stabber. So when you do stitches like chain stitch and stitches like stem stitch, you don't have to do it in 2 motions like I do. I've been stitching for many years, and I just prefer this way. I'm sure if I practiced the other way, I could do it. Okay, I've created a dilemma for myself here. So, I have 3 lovely chains I've created, and I'm almost at the end of my wing, right? It's like a half chain would fit there. So I have a decision to make. I can make a small chain stitch, or I can make maybe a slightly smaller chain stitch and go way over my guideline. And because where I am on the pattern, I know that this is like the tip of the wing. I'm going to go ahead and just over exaggerate it rather than make a short chain stitch. And anchor. So now I'm back at the base. So when I come up along here, you might find that you want to do the wing before you do. What part of the wing is this? The upper wing, I guess. You can go either way. If you're doing it the way I'm doing, which you probably are, just try to get as close along here as you possibly can, up in these little nooks and crannies. That was how I did it. It was like, okay, I've created these nooks and crannies that I wasn't really exactly sure how they were going to look. And so now that's kind of where I come out of for these chain stitches. Alternatively, you can do the chain stitches first, and then you'll have those overlaps. But I was just a little concerned on how the overlaps would work, if they would squish my chain stitches or what. Speaking of what? Oh, here we go. Everything's fine. No problems. Okay. Chain stitch. I haven't even been talking about chain stitch. So we already did detached chain stitch, so this isn't much different, but we are catching our loop. We're going back down that hole we just came up. And go down a stitch length away. Watch your tension here. Same as always. If you can plan ahead a little better than me, make your chains a little bit more consistent in shape or length, that would be awesome. Okay, so here what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to kind of tuck in here. Because I don't know if you can see, these are they're kind of like little segments of petals, right? Or petals, feathers, wings, whatever. What are we doing? What is this, a bird? What am I? Okay, come out here. So chain stitch makes a pretty thick line, obviously. So it can take a little practice trying to figure out when you're making these rows of chain stitch how far apart you want to be so that you get coverage, but you don't have too much overlap. See, here I've created another little pickle for myself. We've got a tiny bit of guideline showing here. So here's a trick, ready? So when I want to kind of taper a chain to a smaller line, a thinner line, I do this with the chain stitch rows, so this will actually be useful information coming up. I will do a long anchor, and then I will split that anchor and go back down. So that kind of tapers my chain. I hope that made sense. So we have chain, 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 split, and then just a straight stitch there. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. When you're doing this chain fill, this is challenging, right? Like this shape was pretty easy. This shape was pretty easy. This shape got a little harder. Things got harder and harder, right? So now we're in this shape that's fairly awkward, right? We're coming out of this that we've created. Oops, I've got a knot situation. Pause. Oh, I don't even know what's happened. Oops, that's not even the right needle. Okay. There we go. So sometimes, so here's my, here's what I'm stitching with. This, and then here is my tail. Sometimes the tails get twisted around your working thread. See that little twist? And it can actually get twisted enough to almost create a knot. And it makes that a thickening, which is why it's like, I'm like yanking through the fabric. That's why I'm yanking through the fabric. And what have I created as a result? I see. Oh, this color is so pretty. Okay, let us continue. Come on, you. I won't judge if you talk to your thread, clearly. So here, I'm trying to decide what to do with myself. I'm really tempted to just go straight, but I'm going to have a little of a guideline showing. Actually, let's do that because it'll be a good teaching moment. Hooray! Oh, well, it's not. It's not showing through. Okay, that worked out then. If it had, I say, I mean, if there's any guidelines showing through you need to cover, just put in a tiny little straight stitch to cover it. Actually, come from way back here. My next row. Alright, I think I'm just going to do one more. And then we'll move on to the flowers. It's up to you if you want to do the flowers first, if you want to do the bird first, it really doesn't matter. Oh, you know what? We didn't do the beak or the eye. The eye you're going to want to do on top of the split stitch. It's a little tricky, right? Because you're going to be covering the guideline for the eye with this split stitch. Or, if you plan ahead, you can leave a little gap there. If you can't see it, just use your best judgment. Okay. All right, let's move on to the flowers. All right, so I decided to work on these flowers demo. So I'm going to start with the daisies. They are filled with satin stitch. So when I do satin stitch, I like to do a center stitch first. Kind of helps with my guideline. And then you can work on either side of it. Just doing straight stitches. Satin stitch is hard. It's hard because it's really easy to see mistakes in it. I won't even say mistakes. I would just say it's easy to see any lack of perfection, which is awful because none of us are perfect. So the tricky parts are staying within the guidelines, which means making sure you come up on your guideline, you go down on your guideline, you maintain the same tension, same stitch direction. It is not easy. So do your best, practice. Again, if you are not a fan of using 6-ply for any of these stitches, I know oftentimes 6-ply is frowned upon with satin stitch. If you're not a fan, you don't have to do it. You can use fewer. All right, I'm gonna switch colors. I'm just following my sample hoop colors. So I'm going to do with petals. I'm being kind of specific here about where I come up because I want to make sure I'm coming up on the outside of the guideline. So it doesn't show through the end. I think tension is really key for this stitch. Again, thinking about just having these stitches relax to the fabric. They're not tight. I can get my needle under them pretty easily. As far as the colors go, so we have 4 different colors for the flowers, and then 3 colors for the leaves and vines. Feel free to follow exactly what I did with the sample hoop, or not. I think the key is just to try to evenly disperse the color. And I tried to make sure that every daisy wasn't exactly the same. Okay, so for this petal, I am still kind of going over the guidelines. This petal is going to be covered by a chain stitch rose. But I think it's helpful to do the petal first and then the chain stitch rose on top. Okay, I do need to finish that, but I will move on to, see, let's do this woven wheel rose because I already have this floss ready to go. So for the circle flowers, we have 3 options. We have a woven wheel rose, chain stitch rose, and open woven wheel rose. You can, if you find that like you don't like one of those or all of them, you can skip them. You can do other stitches here, or maybe you love one of them and you choose to do all of your flowers with the same stitch. That is fine. You could do blanket eyelets. You could do stem stitch roses. Lots of different roses. Okay, let's see. So I just did 4 straight stitches. That was 5. That was 5 straight stitches converging in the center. And now I'm going to come up near the center and I'm going to weave over and under and go in a circle. You can go either direction. It doesn't matter. So I went over, under, and then I'll go over, under. You don't really have to worry about the overs, right? That just naturally happens. Over, under. Oops. So this is one of those stitches that's a lot easier when your hoop is not clamped up. When I usually do this, I am rotating the hoop, so I'm not having to switch hands with my needles. I'm not having to do weird stuff with my wrists. Alright, that looks pretty good. So obviously the tension is pretty darn loose on this. When you feel like you've gone around enough times and covered your guidelines, you can just go back down with your needle to finish it. And weave the ends in if you're done with that floss. Okay, what else do we have happening over here? We've got a chain stitch rose right here. So when I do any kind of stitch where I'm doing like a spiral from the center, I usually like to put a stitch in the center, and it can be anything. You can do like, you do a little cross stitch if you want. I'm going to do a French knot since we're doing French knots in this piece anyways. So we'll go ahead and practice our first French knot. So I have thread over here, needle over here. I'm going to do a wrap, and I'm going to place my needle down near that hole. I'm going to pull to the left gently and down. So my wrap is now on the surface of the fabric, and I'm noticing it's not in the center of my circle. And then I'm going to pull through. You have a nice popping sound. Pull through the rest of the floss. We will do more of those, don't worry. This is just our first one, and it's going to get covered, so you know what? If it looks bad, it's fine. So then we're going to start doing chain stitches. So we go up and down the same hole, leave our loop, come up a stitch length away, catch that loop. Now with these chain stitch roses, we want nice puffy chains. How puffy? That's up to you. Let's see. So I'm going to go back down the same hole I just came up. It's kind of hard to see. It doesn't have to be exactly the same hole. No one's going to know the difference. Do your best. And then we're going to go up, stitch away in a spiral, catch our next loop. So let's see, what can you see on the screen? Can you see? Yes, you guys can see over here. So like here's my French knot, and I'm spiraling around out from the center. Okay. I know it's kind of hard to see because like every stitch covers the next stitch. So here's a chain, there's a chain. I'm going down for my next chain. I don't think I've ever made one this poofy before. And these are really tiny stitches. So like right now I'm on the other side of that French knot. And this stitch will get us back to this side. So we made almost a box. And I'll keep going. If you find that you're making one of these and it's extremely poofy like this, and it's getting snagged on other stitches, you might want to do these last if you're going to make yours exceptionally loose. Oops. So I just pulled mine, so I just lost my looseness, but I will show you how to fix it. So you can see I pulled this, which pulled that. It turns into this like chain reaction. So I'm just kind of gently tugging on those. I gotta figure what this is. Who does this belong to? That's part of the strand. Okay. So I'm just giving little tugs. Just try to pull some of that tension back. I feel like this is way too loose, so I'm going to come in here and pull a bit. There we go. So you can get real fiddly with these. You do not need to have yours this poofy. You can make them not poofy at all. You can use the same tension you used on the wings. It just makes like a fluffy flower. That one's pretty wild, to be honest. That's all right. We're going to go with it. Okay. If you don't have yours is floofy, it's going to look more like this. You can actually see the chain stitches here, right? So it probably looks better than this, whatever I just created. What even is this? That's fascinating. Yeah, well, let's keep going. So let's go ahead and take a look at doing an open woven wheel rose. You can do anything in the center here. If you want to just fill the center with satin stitch, that's fine if you're not really into the knots. I'm going to go ahead and do some French knots. I think, well, let's go ahead and start in the center and then see what happens. Okay, so I do my wrap. I put the tip of my needle near the hole I came out of. Not in the same hole, just near. And then I pull that wrap down to the surface of the fabric before pushing my needle through. I get that nice pop sound and then pull through the excess. So I'm going to add some more in a circle here. So I teach just doing a single wrap because it's easier. The more wraps you do, the harder it is to pull your needle through, like I'm doing. There you go. You can see that I am actually loosening my fabric as I do these, not on purpose. This one is probably completely unnecessary, but I feel like I needed to do 5 for whatever reason. Okay, so now I have my center filled in. I'm coming in with my other color for the rose. And I'm doing the spokes like how I did with the regular woven rose, but instead of the spokes converging at the center, the spokes just go right up to our center stitches, whatever they may be. Now I'm coming up near the center, doesn't matter where, on what side, but I'm just going to start doing that weaving again, the over, under, all the way around. And you can see it's going to start to kind of cover those center stitches, and that is fine. Oops, 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 oops. Yeah, that just got pulled too tight. So I like to do my flowers and then do the leaves, but you might find that you prefer to do the leaves and then the flowers on top, and that's totally fine. If you're not sure what you like, maybe do one set of florals one way and one set another way. Nice loose tension. Use caution. You don't want to pierce any, you don't want to pierce the fabric. You also don't want to pierce any of your previous wraps. So I know some people like to actually turn their needle and go backwards, eye first. That way you can't stab anything on accident. Oops. All right, this is kind of good because this isn't my best work. So I'm going to show you how I like to kind of fix these when they're a little bit lopsided. Like this, I don't know how this got so loose. There's a weird strand hanging out here. So I'm going to go down with my thread, and I'm just going to go along the edges and add stitches to kind of strengthen and kind of support the woven stitches. So here I'm gonna, you can even like grab them if you want and tuck them in with you, something like that. Well, that didn't work. Maybe it will. Sort of gonna, I'll come back here, try it from this side, see if we can kind of tuck it in. Now these aren't very tight stitches. We want to try to keep them loose so they match with the rest of the flower. And then I feel like this is like thicker than this side, so I'm going to add another stitch up here to kind of even it out, balance it up. And then one over here to finish, I believe, hopefully. another thing is when we get towards the end, we're going to be adding like some French knots and fly stitches, and those are good for kind of hiding little mistakes and tucking little corners in and whatnot. All right, so there's our open woven wheel. I thought I should probably, I'm just going to demo the chain stitch rows again because I felt like I did kind of a chaotic job on the other one. So let's go ahead and do the one over here. And I'm going to make it tighter so you can kind of see better, hopefully. Actually, you know, I won't even start with a center stitch. We'll just go for it. So on the other one, remember I started with that French knot, but here I'm just going to follow these guidelines I made for myself earlier. So there's my first really tiny chain stitch going down the center. And I'm going to come up over here. The center is the hardest part because the angles are so sharp. That's why I kind of like to do that center stitch to go around. Makes it a little less sharp. So I'm just going along that little blue spiral I made, doing teeny tiny chain stitches. So let's see, after this we're just gonna do the leaves, right? I don't know if you noticed, I did stitch a little bit more on the bird. And you may notice that I'm filling in with that dark blue differently than I did in the sample hoop. And I'll probably just keep going the way I am. I guess I just wasn't paying attention. I was just doing whatever I felt like doing, which happens. And it's not wrong. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. Uh-oh, stuck on something. Oh, I have a knot. There's a knot. I got it. So this is the same stitch as that other one, the other chain stitch rows, but you can see we get a much different looking flower when I keep these stitches a little bit tighter. Oh, and then here I can show you, I forgot. So remember when we did the wings, I was talking about that taper. So if I just stop here, it's kind of a clunky end. So if I do that long anchor stitch and then I split it, and then come down, kind of smooths out that edge to make it more round. So yeah, you can try it, see if it works for you. All right, so just real quick what I was saying about the Bluebird, so you can see here my stitch. I started here and I did like the outline, and then I just went for a second like inline. I inlined my outline. Versus here, I did an outline, and then I started, I kind of chose this point here to come down. So I don't know, it's easier to show versus tell. I mean, how much of a difference is it making? I don't know. Is one better than the other? I don't know. Is one cleaner than the other? Again, I don't know. I'll continue just to fill it in this manner, and then you can see, I'll show you guys what that looks like so you can decide which way you want to fill yours. So yeah, all right. So let's take a look at the bird one more time. We're just gonna do a little bit of finishing touches on it. Let's see, I did want to mention, you can say I did some work. I did end up finishing the body of the bluebird by filling in with kind of concentric shapes, kind of echoing the original. Oops, there's one of my hairs, gross. Versus here, when I did it, I did kind of like, I don't know if we want to call those rows. I guess it's more rows than, filling in from the outside in. So there you can just see the difference. I don't know if one looks better to you than the other. I don't know which I prefer, actually, now that I'm looking at it. But just wanted to mention that. And also, you can see on the tail here, so on the original, I did the row here, and then I did the outside, and then I started filling in. And so because the tail tapers, right, it's skinnier here and wider here, you can't exactly do it perfectly, right, with rows. So I had to sneak in some rows down here to kind of compensate. They're pretty hard to see. But I don't know if you can tell that, like, over here things get a little confusing as far as which row is which. I basically had to like sneak in some half rows or quarter rows. So here I took a different approach. I just started at one end, I'm going to the other, and now you can see I've covered the guideline here, but I still have some guidelines showing here. So what I'm going to do to finish this one is I'm just going to continue, but the rows are just going to do this, right? So you're still going to have to do some of those rows either way. It's just a matter if you want them at one side or the other, or if you want to hide them within the tail. Okay, whew. Now that I've thoroughly over-explained that, let us move on. So we're just going to do the beak really quick with some satin stitch. If you have questions at any time, please send me an email. That's going to be the best way to get a hold of me. You might want to switch to 3 strands for this beak, huh? It's a little bulky using the 6 strands, but I'm going to try it. I'm trying to come up sort of underneath that original stitch. Tricky, a little bit tricky. Let's see how that looks. I don't love it. I'm actually going to do another stitch from the tip and come down. I think that might look better. I don't know if I love that either. I still have to fiddle with it some more. I don't want to waste your time trying to perfect something I can't perfect, but that's the beak. And then for the eye, I'm coming up here, and I'm just going to do French knot. Do a single wrap, come back down here. Okay, if you're struggling with your French knots and want to do a different stitch there, like a really tiny satin stitch, go for it. You can also use a different color if you don't like the brown. I did want to show you while I have the brown, you can see the gaps here. And I mentioned before, like, you're free to keep those or to fill them. I feel like they're not as noticeable here. Why is that? I'll have to think about that. This looks slightly bigger, doesn't it? I don't know. Well, regardless, let me show you. I'll ponder the mysteries of life later on my own time. So, like this This one's really noticeable, I feel like. So I'm just going to come in. I'm trying not to pierce my stitch. It's not working very well. And just come down. You could even use a different color. That might be kind of fun. To come in and do like a straight stitch in the center of every single one of these with a different color. Let me try it. I'm going to come from the bottom and then go up. Let's see, I brought a little fuzzy with me. So sometimes when you pull up those fuzzies, if you want, you can try pulling down from the bottom, or this is also why we have our scissors. Well, that didn't work as well as I'd hoped. Here we go. Hopefully that'll disappear. Okay. Oh, that's gonna bug me. We have to get some tweezers on that. So up to you if you want to fill these in or not, or if you like them open. There's nothing wrong with seeing the fabric through. And then there's also, like here you can see there's like a little kind of gap between those two. And again, I'm just going to do a straight stitch to just fill it in. There was one over here, like here, there's like a gap from when I made this row. Maybe I should have come from here to kind of fill it in. So it's up to you, like I guess potentially you could use the light blue to do a straight stitch here, a straight stitch here, just to fill those in. Maybe I'll do that later. Okay, let's move on with our lives. Let's do the leaves. Let's go ahead and do the fly stitch ones first. So these ones are pretty simple. We're going to start with a straight stitch. So I think the key with this is to make sure you go outside of your guidelines. So I'm making sure I come up above my guideline here so that it gets covered, right? Because these guidelines are permanent. So let's see, I came down, what, a little more than halfway, maybe halfway. And then you're going to come up on one side or the other, doesn't really matter which. Again, kind of going over that guideline. Make sure we cover it. And I'm going to go down right on the other side, leaving a loop here. Now I'm going to come up. I actually, if you can, come up the same hole you went down for that original stitch. And I'm catching my loop, pulling the slack here. And then go down on the opposite side to tack it down. And then again, so at this point, I mean, my guideline's pretty much covered till here. So you could start way down here if you want. Or you could start up higher. It depends on kind of how you want your shape to look. And pull. And that pretty much covered my guidelines. So if I look here though, oh no, I did just do two. Looks like most of them I did just do 2 fly stitches per leaf. It looks like this one I added a third because it's very, very tiny though. It looks like you can either do 2 kind of more loosely done fly stitches. These 2, it looks like I did 3. But if I wasn't like, you know, really inspecting this, you wouldn't, no one would know, you know, it doesn't matter, is what I'm trying to say. Because you probably do fly stitches a little bit differently than I do. So see how many you can fit in there. If it's just 2, if it's just 3, it doesn't matter. I got a little knot. Oh yay, that one disappeared. Lucky us. think we might need 3 on this one. Especially if you have those touching. So see, I came up where I went down on the anchor of the previous fly stitch. So they're very close together, right? So we have this little piece here we haven't filled in, so I will do 3 here. I'm just going down at the base. Ta-da! So to do the stem here, I just did a back stitch, I believe. Really, once they're touching, there's not a lot of room. There's just room for like a small straight stitch to kind of cover here all the way down, right? Okay. So yeah, this could even be a single stitch if you want, or do multiple back stitches. Okay, let's move on. What do we have next? Actually, let me do, oops, I just tangled myself. I'm going to do this one because it's going to get a little bit covered with the feather stitch. So I want to show what that's going to look like. I meant to retighten my fabric before getting back on my clamp, and I clearly did not. I get a little lazy with the using a screwdriver. I know if I did that, I wouldn't have to worry about retightening. But then, of course, when you want to get your work out, you gotta get the screwdriver back out. Heaven forbid. Okay. Also, if you are using a hoop like this and you do not want your finished work to be in a hoop, you might not want to leave the fabric hooped up long term. I'm talking like days, weeks, because you're going to get a crease created from the hoop, and it's really hard to get out. Like I hate having to iron, but even ironing, you know, how we get creases out, it doesn't, it's like a permanent crease. So just something to think about. Okay, so I've got my dark green, so we can do the feather and the fern. So for feather, we're coming up here. I'm going down over here. It's kind of hard to see where my guideline was before, but okay, so it's essentially going to start out like a fly stitch. So I'm going to come up here to catch my slack. Oops, and apparently pull out all my green thread that I haven't trimmed yet. So I don't want to trim it because I want to finish it. Okay, so now I'm pulling. So if we were doing a if we were doing a fly stitch, I would just go back down, right? But we're doing basically I'm afraid to use the word chain because it's not chain stitch, but we're doing like a chain of fly stitches turns into feather stitch. Okay, so here's one fly. We're going to go down here to start the next fly. Catch it at the base. And we just kind of swing back and forth, creating these U's that are connected. I always think of like underwater scenes. Something about, what is it about the feather stitch always makes me think of that. I don't know why. Sorry, I'm having some thread difficulties. Okay. And then to finish, we just go down like we would with the fly stitch. If you want, you can make the stem a little longer if there's any room. But I'm trying to just kind of make it disappear under my florals there. Ta-da! Okay, and then so the other one we have here is fern stitch. Essentially, well, it's up to you how you want to do it. I think there's like in books you'll see specific ways like, oh, start from the top, start from the bottom, do this one and then that one and that one and then go down and blah, blah. I can't remember and I get confused. So I pretty much treat it like a back stitch. So I'll do like a back stitch stem. And then I'll hit all the little, what do we want to call those? Branches, the little mini branches. I'll just hit those on the way back down. So side to side. And so they all use those back stitch holes. These are just so cute. So when you're all done, like if you've completed your bird, you've completed all your flowers as much as you've wanted to follow along with the pattern, and you have like extra colors, you can add more of these. You can add more fern stitch. You can add more, any stitch really, to kind of make it your own. If there's one stitch in particular you really liked, or not. All right, we'll do my fishbone here. So with fishbone, we're going to start at the top. This is a little bit awkward because we're sideways. Usually I like to do fishbone up and down, right? Does that make sense? Here we're 90 degrees to the left. All right, so we're doing a center stitch. And I don't know, I usually go about halfway down, I suppose. And we're going to come up to the right of it on the edge of our guideline. I think I have a knot. And then I'm going to go down. I'm going to cross over that center line and go down on the left. Right? Back up on the left. Cross over the center line, go to the right. And repeat. Just making these straight stitches, bouncing back and forth. Making sure you cover your guidelines. At the beginning I mentioned it can be helpful to have your center line drawn on your leaf. Definitely do that if it helps you. I'm actually like half watching some birds out my window as I do this. We have a bird feeder out there now. There's some fascinating battles happening. There's so many doves here. Lots of different kinds of doves. There's like white-winged and mourning, and I'm sure plenty of others. And then we have lots of finches that come. And the bird feeders are small, so the finches get inside. And then the doves try to get inside. They don't always fit. Some of the smaller doves can fit, but they all end up on the ground, like fighting amongst themselves, chasing each other. There's lots of flapping of wings, and they're pretty entertaining. And the cats love them. Our cats are all indoor cats, so they really enjoy sitting in the windowsills and watching all the birds out there. Okay, How am I doing here? I think I was watching the birds a bit too much. I can see some guidelines showing through, but I think it's okay. Oops, getting tangled with my other colors in the back here. What did I just do? What side did I just do? I stopped paying attention. So at the end, basically, I don't know if you can see, so obviously our first stitch is straight up and down, and as we go down, our stitches, the angle here starts to kind of fan out, and then by the end, right, our angle is way over here, and we don't have any more crossing happening at the bottom. So like basically the final couple stitches, if you need them, if there's any guideline poking out like that, they're just going to kind of converge at this one point if needed. I honestly don't even know if I need these stitches. There's just such a small amount of the guideline showing. And if you, let's see, I know I kind of have it, see how there's like a bit of a gap right here. If you go through and you do your stitching, like, I don't know what I did over here. That's where I was watching the birds too much. You can always come in and sneak in a stitch if you have a little gap you want to fill. You can always come in and like use other colors too. I'm trying to just have this like hide. But if you want to add other colors, that's kind of fun too. Okay, so that's how our fish bones look. And then I did like a little straight stitch. Up to you if you want to add this or not. I just did like a stitch like this on mine. Optional. But I will show you how I did the stem. So I did it with a whipped back stitch. Okay, so to whip, I'm coming up near the base here, and I'm just gonna weave under every single back stitch. I'm not piercing the fabric, I'm not piercing the stitches, I'm just weaving. Similarly, remember I showed you if you want, you can always go backwards with your needle, right? So if you want to go eye first, because we don't need the sharp tip for this, right? We're not piercing anything. So if you like doing it that way, you could try that. You can even whip with a different color, and then you'll get kind of a candy cane effect. It's kind of fun. I like whip back stitch because it takes your back stitch and it kind of smooths it out. I just feel like it's a nice kind of neutral, I don't know, easy way to make a little line there. And then I just go back down here. I guess I'm going back down where I first had my first stitch. And that's it. All right, so once you're done with all of that, you're going to take a look at your florals and see if you want to add anything. So if you want, you can come in and do, go over here, I did some fly stitches. To kind of add a little color over here and a little more details. We can also use these stitches to hide any mistakes. right, and then final touch. So you can see there's like gaps here, of course. So I have this color. So when I chose like which colors to use, I just tried to, so I didn't want to use like this color here, right? Because they would just kind of blend in. So I picked a color, like you could use this color over here. That'd be pretty. And so same for here. It's like I want to make sure it's not a color that would be touching. So I'm going to come up to a French knot here to hide the fabric if desired. You could probably put one here, so I would maybe use this color to do one there. You could add them over here, whatever you want. You could probably stick one here too. So lots of opportunities. If you want, even you can even add some of the green behind as well if you want to do green instead. So yeah, I think that's it. Hope you had fun. I hope you made something cool. And again, if you have any questions, please send me an email. I'll make sure that's in the description for the video. So yay, have fun.